One of the most respected, patriotic, and brave things a man or woman can do is serve this country. Welcome to Vision of a Veteran. Spotlighting a veteran who served and may have gotten wounded. A lot of our guests have lost their sight or are vision impaired, and we'll hear their ups and downs of their lives and how to make a difference to support their brothers and sisters to navigate the waves. From the Wisdom for the Blind Studios in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, this is Vision of a Veteran. Now your host, Benjamin Keeley. Produced by Wisdom for the Blind and VNS Productions, a division of VNS International.
Keith, thank you for that great intro, man. You are the man, making me look good all the time. And yes, thank you very much, guys, for joining us for another episode of Vision of a Veteran, where we spotlight various different veterans, the good times, the bad times, and what they're doing today and how they're moving forward. And today is a great opportunity for me to introduce to you a good friend of mine. He's been a mentor. He is a great advocate for our brothers and sister veterans, and he has been just an awesome individual to become friends with. It's my great pleasure to introduce to you the Executive Director of the Blind Veterans Association, Mr. Don Overton.
Hey, Ben, it's a pleasure being with you, sir.
I appreciate your time joining us. What we'd like to do is talk a little bit about where you grew up, and then we'll take it from there, if that's okay.
Great starting point. So I was born and raised a New England boy. I was born in Norwalk, Connecticut. I spent all of my formative years in that town. Our family had deep roots in New England, so Norwalk was a really nice seaside community on Long Island Sound. We had several family businesses, and that's where I got all of my initial education, and I went to high school at Norwalk High School for the Bears. I was a multi-athlete through high school, so I swam competitively since a very young age, but I also played lacrosse and football while I was in high school as well.
Wow. It's lacrosse and all that's pretty heavy.
We enjoyed it. You know, you spend a lot of time as a swimmer, and again, that's where I started off most of my athletics. It's such an independent sport in the pool, a lot of isolation. So I think both lacrosse and football afforded me the opportunity to have that good contact and make sure that I was still engaging with the community around me, right?
Yep, that's great. And then from high school, then what did you do next there, Don?
I relocated initially right after high school. My mother had remarried and moved down into Hampton Roads, so the Virginia Beach, Chesapeake area. I moved down with her. We opened a family business down there doing custom window treatments for a period of time. So I spent close to 2 years after high school in the Hampton Roads area, and then opted for a military career. So I actually went down to the recruiting station. The majority of my family had all been in the Marine Corps. I went down to see the Marine recruiters. They weren't there. The Army recruiters were there. They showed me a video on airborne operations, and they had me hooked at that point in time. I didn't want to do anything after I saw the videos but jump out of aircraft. So joined the Army and shipped off to basic training, AIT, at Fort Gordon as a combat signaler, eventually jump school down at Fort Benning, and then ended up serving with the 82nd Airborne Division at Fort Bragg, North Carolina.
North Carolina is a great area. That's where I'm from, Raleigh and Wilmington, North Carolina.
Both great areas. Raleigh-Durham's a phenomenal area to be in, and Wilmington obviously has pretty much the best of the coastal area, so another gorgeous area to spend some time in. So you were very fortunate.
Yeah, we were real pleased to be able to get out there and go to Hilton Head and all the great places in Carolina Beach. And, you know, we used to have a boat and we'd go all over, you know, up and down the coast there.
It's great. You know, it's a great coastline for folks that haven't had a chance to spend any time along the Carolinas, and, you know, between the Outer Banks and being able to get into Pamlico Sound and some of those areas, it just gives you the best of everything. So really great areas.
It is. So you went off and joined the Army, and I don't understand why you'd want to jump out of a perfectly good plane, but tell us about that.
Well, first of all, anybody that's spent any time realizes there's no such thing as a perfectly good aircraft. Most of them are leaking hydraulic like sieves, and so probably one of the best approaches is, to exit that aircraft as quickly as possible. But as a combat signaler, I basically, humped communications gear. It gave us some pretty good packs. I think we ranked right up there with our folks that were in our mortar platoons that, were either humping the bases or the tubes of some of the mortars. So we carried a pretty good pack, usually afforded us a door position on our jumps. So it got us out of the aircraft pretty quick and down to the ground equally quick. But it was a great opportunity. I thoroughly enjoyed my time in division with the 82nd. And, the nice thing is, as America's Guard of Honor, we're always rotating through quick reaction forces. So anything going on in the world, the 82nd is usually geared and ready to be wheels up and on location. So it was a great time.
I understand you got deployed with the 82nd.
I did. So our initial deployments were Desert Shield, Desert Storm, the first Persian Gulf War. So we deployed over to Saudi Arabia. We were part of the advanced party, so we got in there pretty early. It was rather interesting. We had no supplies in theater when we arrived, again, being one of the first units out and in. So it was interesting to face off. We deployed out to the border of Saudi and Iraq, and there we were, light infantry, facing off against Saddam Hussein's mechanized division. So as you look across the border and you are digging those shallow fighting positions, looking at these mechanized divisions going, this is going to be an interesting skirmish for sure.
And then from there, how long did you stay over there?
So we were over there full deployment. We got over there. We had deployed in August of 1990. I ended up sustaining my injuries. I was the victim of a blast, which rendered me blind. I was totally blind at first, penetrating blast injury to both eyes. So I perforated both eyes, sustained some head injury, some additional hand and other body injuries from shrapnel, and some burning. I was medevac out of theater into Longstuhl, Germany. Most of that time was spent in a medically induced coma. I vaguely remember bits and pieces of all of that, and eventually waking up in a very, very strange situation back at Walter Reed, and my family had already been brought in, and I remember coming to, and my father was actually trying to bathe me. Obviously, we'd been in a combat environment for quite some time, and even after going through the surgical procedures, they don't do a very good job of cleaning you up. So I know everybody tells the stories of, just how much dirt was still coming off, but it was really strange to be an adult man, and all of a sudden there you are with your father trying to give you a bath and help get you cleaned up. So,
and how is that with the family coming back and your spirits and everything?
It was a tough transition. I think anybody that's experienced combat in and of itself deals with the aftermath of transitioning back home. Obviously, coming back with the sensory deprivations, I was dealing with some hearing-related issues. Had to have multiple surgical procedures, so I was in and out of those medically induced comas. I had sustained, additional head and brain injuries as well. So there was concerns around all of those vital organs. Going through the process of shrapnel and burn-related injuries. So anybody that's dealt with that knows being scrubbed and really what it's like to go through all of that. But it was a tough process, trying to understand, trying to connect the pieces of what had happened, being in and out of that fog of that medically induced coma, not realizing, and again, at that time I was totally blind still, partly from bandages and surgical procedures. So not knowing, reality from fantasy, being awake versus being in dream states, it was all a really difficult process to go through. at the time, and then just the recovery in and of itself, spending months and months in a medical facility going through those types of reconstructive and rehabilitative processes. And then, of course, there's the good time after they get you stable enough, they manage to ship you back, to your unit as you begin the process of what it's going to be like transitioning out, waiting to go through the med board process to be medically retired from the military. So being blind back in the 82nd Airborne Division, it was rather comical trying to figure out how to maneuver around the base, trying to get to a dining facility. Nobody understood, sighted guide or any of those processes. And then, you always had the young officers who wanted to scream at me for not saluting them and trying to explain to them, sir, you can't even see you, let alone see your rank. You're gonna have to deal with me not saluting you for a while. So, but it was definitely an interesting transition, and again, it takes quite some time to go through all those processes, and then all of a sudden, boom, one day you find yourself out of the military, and you're trying to figure out what comes next. Here was what you had hoped was going to be your career. That career was over, and now you're out, and trying to figure the world out at that point in time.
And when you were discharged, what kind of support did you get from the military or the outside?
Ben, the support wasn't there. This was in the early 1990s, so we had just come out of the Cold War, so there wasn't a lot in the way of transition services, certainly not what we've seen with our post 9/11 veterans, with those long sustained conflicts that really helped the Department of Defense and the Department of Veterans Affairs begin to build out some of those better transition services. Certainly not perfect, still not perfect to this day, but back then there was really nothing. I was given a military retiree card. I was told that I could utilize providers for my medical care, and I was told that there was an agency called the Department of Veterans Affairs, and I should probably fill out some documents with them and see what they could do to help me. So I transitioned out, and I think the most interesting thing was I was receiving my retired pay at the time, and the way they scaled everything, it equated to a few $100s a month. So I had gone from my full military salary, housing stipends, all of the other benefits, to all of a sudden this meager form of subsistence as I had to begin to navigate the Department of Veterans Affairs process to figure out how disability compensation worked, how to apply for it. And then as many folks will be aware, that's anywhere from 9 to 12 months waiting for a rating decision to come through to begin receiving VA benefits.
So when you first got out, you didn't have all those benefits. You had to go fight for it, and there wasn't an advocate there to help you or anything like that.
There was really nothing. It was very interesting. And again, I initially transitioned out. I was married when I was in service. I had a young family, and, it was too much for us. It was too much for us to be able to keep the family together. The challenges were there. There were the challenges of the extended separation on deployment, the other areas. So I found myself back. I was very fortunate that, my mother was there for me. My mom was a nurse, so she really understood the challenges that I was going to be going through. So she allowed me to come spend some time with her back in the Hampton Roads area, and, kind of by trial and error, we found ourselves at the Hampton VA Medical Center, and lo and behold, as I was kind of wandering the halls trying to figure out what I was doing, a VIS coordinator, a Visual Impairment Services Team coordinator, also a blinded veteran himself, Mr. Philip Pugh, happened to find me, and that was really the beginning of my journey towards understanding the Department of Veterans Affairs. Mr. Pugh was an amazing individual and took me in and began to really mentor and guide me through the VA processes and getting me connected with Blind Rehabilitation Services, and that was the beginning of my journey towards finding, my new normal and finding my way back towards an independent life and being able to challenge myself.
Well, that was some great news. What we're going to do now is we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back, and we're going to learn about the rehab and the next steps for Don. Don, stand by and we'll be right back.
VA's Office of Blind Rehabilitation Services estimates there are approximately 130,000 veterans in the United States who are legally blind, and more than 1 million veterans who have low vision that causes a loss of ability to perform necessary daily activities. In this era of instant communication, where we get overwhelmed with data or facts that are useless to unsighted individuals, wouldn't it be great if we could count on news focused on real problems that impact the daily lives of veterans without sight? Introducing Wisdom for Blinded Veterans, an advanced informational portal designed by blind veterans specifically for blind and vision impaired vets that, like them, are facing challenges every day. Hi, my name is Ben, and I know the frustration. I've struggled in day-to-day tasks for over 20 years since I lost my eyesight. One of my biggest challenges has always been trying to stay up to date with the latest information of my eye disease, local news, and the ever-changing technology. I wanted to be able to have one single site that merged all the data scattered, and that's why we created Wisdom for Blinded Vets. This is a portal that can be accessed via the web, a smartphone app, telephone, email, text messaging, or Amazon's Alexa. It integrates with readers such as JAWS or Apple's VoiceOver and various other tools to give you a seamless experience. This portal will keep us updated on a variety of topics and will share knowledge that can help make our lives easier and more fulfilled. Highlights of the topics covered on the portal include podcasts, events, news, blind rehab and training, information on the BVA and other groups, a list of coordinator and bros list, online groups to interact with fellow vets facing the same challenges, and much more. Give us a try. You will not be disappointed. To learn more about us, visit our website www.w4bv.org. If you're interested in sharing your knowledge, please consider becoming a contributor by logging into our portal and going to the contributor section for more information. Wisdom for Blinded Veterans, transforming blind veterans' lives.
And we're back. Thanks for sticking with us. We were talking with Don, and we were just getting into how he was finding the VA rehab and getting involved with that thanks to his Viz coordinator. And Don, so take us back to when you got in with the Viz coordinator and some of the programs that they tied you in with and how you started dealing with some of these things.
Yeah, so again, Philip Pugh, amazing individual, true champion and advocate for veterans, serving as a visual impairment services team coordinator, began to connect me, advise me about the amazing rehabilitation program that the Department of Veterans Affairs had available to those of us dealing with sight loss and visual impairment. He coordinated for me since I was from Connecticut. We felt that it would be a good fit to go up to the Eastern Blind Rehabilitation Center in West Haven, Connecticut. I went up. That's an inpatient program. And so we checked in to the medical center there and began the process of realizing what was available to us after sight loss, which, beginning with orientation and mobility, I was, again, very fortunate realizing, I was still a very young individual. I'm going to not call my orientation and mobility instructor out by name because I don't want to get that individual into any trouble. But, the programs back then were really tailored to meet our needs. So being young, my orientation and mobility instructor said, hey, I'm going to pick you up in the evening, and he did, and we went out to bars and clubs, and he said, you're young, you're going to need to be back out there. You got to really, figure out how to get your way through a bar, how to be able to order a drink, how to find a restroom and do those things. So, part of my rehabilitation was real world scenarios of what my life was going to be like now, and I'm so grateful that all of my instructors took the time, my living skills instructors, making sure that, I was able to be as fully independent as possible with the things that I enjoyed to do, hobbies, crafting, preparing meals, getting into the adaptive technology side of things, learning the computer skills. Not only was I dealing with the blindness, but I also had lost a couple of fingers and had some hand injuries with some nerve damage and other damage. So learning how to one-hand type initially and then how to adapt and adjust the keyboard when I got better sensation in. So the program was really tailored to meet my unique needs, making sure I was able to get back out into the gym to take care of my health. So it was just such an amazing program and truly became a catalyst for me to realize that, I didn't necessarily have to live. I remember some of my family members, one of my grandfathers felt as if I was going to need nursing home care, right? And for a 20-some-odd-year-old individual, it's like, whoa, I think there might be some opportunities for me to have some independence. And so the VA Blind Rehabilitation Center really gave me those opportunities to realize there was life after blindness. And it served as the catalyst and the motivator for me to pursue a college education. I took a little bit of time, went out to visit some friends that I had connected with in Hampton Roads that were on the Navy side of the house.
That's the better side.
Yeah, whatever. They had been stationed out in Hawaii, so I went over to Oahu for about a year with them, which was a great opportunity for me. He was a former Navy SEAL, Vietnam era, phenomenal individual who really motivated and drove me to challenge my boundaries. They would take me out and drop me off in the middle of a pineapple field and, they'd monitor me and make sure I was okay, but they forced me to, figure out how to navigate on my own, how to use public transportation, how to really challenge those boundaries and not get too comfortable with any scenarios. I went to community college while I was out there to take some classes, begin seeing what that experience was going to be like. I enjoyed it, but the island, tends to shrink after a period of time. So I wanted to get back, and I had an opportunity and was accepted to East Carolina University. So I relocated to Pitt County in North Carolina, Greenville, North Carolina, known as G Vegas, and attended East Carolina University, where I graduated with a degree in social work.
That's great. It's good to hear that that your friends and your companions and everybody and the rehab center all started to build that support network and the confidence that you had. And, the rehab centers, there's, I think, 13 of them. The VA has all throughout the United States. I think it's a great program. And then to have, brothers and sisters working with you to challenge you and get that going, I think that's great. So you went into East Carolina?
Yeah, so East Carolina, I had the opportunity to study there, really enjoyed the programs. It was interesting. As I said, I studied social work. I wanted to explore other options, but I went to school on the vocational rehabilitation, the VRNE program through the Department of Veterans Affairs. It was a better program than our GI Bill benefits back then, so I waived the GI Bill benefits in lieu of the VRNE, which was fascinating. That program had a counselor, and one of the things that we discussed was the challenges around employment for people with vision loss and visual impairment. We tend to experience a 70+% unemployment rate for people that are dealing with visual impairments and vision loss. So as part of our discussions, we felt as if social work was a really good program, getting into human services, helping to be able to connect and give back to the community. I loved studying social work, psychology, psychiatry. I really enjoyed it. I was a bit of a policy wonk as I got into my advanced studies and really enjoyed the policy side of the house. I did my internship at the end of my program with the United States Senate office, and that's what really launched me into advocacy. But interestingly, the challenge with social work after graduation was almost every job that I tried to get in social work required a driver's license. So there was always some additional barrier, an additional challenge that was thrown, at us. So as much as we thought that was going to be the perfect program, the problem was then that, you needed to be able to do client visits and site visits and other things. So in the mindset of the employment world, if you didn't have a driver's license, well, you just weren't a suitable candidate for employment.
You had mentioned earlier that you were given a counselor and it helped you understand the differences between the different programs and the grants and stuff like that. How did you figure all that out?
Due diligence, and really what helped me, I think, more than anything, and it's what really grounded me in military and veterans advocacy. The individual in Hawaii was, again, one of the first individuals, and he being a Vietnam combat veteran, Navy SEAL, full career, amazing individual, just a salt of the earth person. But I also connected in the local community with the veterans community, and I connected with the Vietnam Veterans of America. For anybody that has been associated with anybody of the Vietnam era, it's an amazing group of individuals, and the way that they were treated upon their return, one of my greatest motivators in working alongside and really being mentored by the Vietnam veterans was, their motto of never again shall one generation of veterans abandon another. It was just horrific the way that they were treated and never truly welcomed home from their service.
Oh, that's definitely so true. I think that era just didn't get the respect that they deserved.
But they stepped up, and they've been there, and they've led the charge for all of us that served after them. They weren't accepted into some of the traditional veteran service organizations. They were disenfranchised and not welcomed. So they built their own. And VVA, and Vietnam Veterans of America, just phenomenal advocates and folks that really helped me cut my teeth in veterans advocacy and mentored me. But they were also the ones that helped me refine my understanding of the VA system and connecting with things like a VRNE program back then and how to initiate the contact and make sure that I was maximizing the benefits that I had earned through my service.
And what I'm learning from your story, Don, is that you're really starting to become an advocate with your training and your experiences. So what have you done after the college, and did you start putting this skill set to work?
Yeah, so I stated earlier, I was able to do my internship at a United States Senate office, which led to a position as a staffer, first at the state and in local offices dealing with constituent services, but eventually transitioning into Washington, D.C. I was on the Senate side for a period of time and then had a unique opportunity to transition over to the House. So I got to serve in staff positions on both the Senate and the House sides of Congress, which allowed me to really and truly begin to understand the political and policy elements, things that intrigued me already. And then one day I just really got common sense and couldn't get over that dais fast enough, and I was able to enter the world of veterans advocacy and get on the other side of the witness table and begin really championing and advocating for our fellow brothers and sisters. And I've been afforded the opportunity to do that now for about 30 years at so many different levels. I've been an accredited claims representative for those 30 years, started off doing local chapter service officer work. I did that pre-accreditation with the Disabled American Veterans and Vietnam Veterans of America, and then got my accreditation, served as a county veteran service officer down in Florida, and really jumped around and got involved in all of the different groups, American Legion. I joined every veteran service organization that would have me, and I learned as much as I could from all of those groups, got involved with their honorary societies, so whether it was the National Order of Trench Rats or the 40 and 8 and these different groups that are in there, I just became a sponge and wanted to learn as much as I could. And then, I had the opportunity again to walk in the footsteps of probably one of the greatest veterans advocates out there, Rick Weidman of Vietnam Veterans of America. And Rick was kind enough to take me under his wing and really teach me the ins and outs of what it is to represent our community and how to represent it on Capitol Hill and how to be a true champion for our military and veteran communities. And I've welcomed having the opportunity to do that for, again, going on 30 years now at different levels and with different positions and with different associations.
And we're going to take a break, and then when we come back, we're going to get into some of those organizations and some of the things you're doing today. Please stay with us, and Don, I appreciate all the knowledge that you're passing right now. We'll be right back.
Ice cream. All the ice cream in my house, in the world, and most of my stuffed animals.
My video games and, my phone.
What would you give for your freedom? Would you give your eyesight? Would you give ever seeing the sunset again? Would you give the ability to see your children's future? Thousands of brave men and women who served in the United States Armed Forces have given their eyesight in defense of our freedom. And the Blinded Veterans Association wants to give them their freedom back, but it needs your help. Go to BVA.org to find out about how BVA's free programs and services, advocacy, education, peer support, scholarships, and more help America's heroes to not just deal with the emotional and physical issues of sudden sight loss or impairment, but actually work to get them back to the independent lives they deserve to live. Go to BVA.org to find out how you can make a difference. They fought for your independence, and by going to BVA.org, you can find out how to help these veterans regain theirs. Go to BVA.org today.
And thanks for sticking with us. We're speaking with Don. He's going over such a great turn of becoming a great advocate for our fellow brothers and sisters. And we want to get back into Don. If you could basically tell us a little bit more on how you used what you learned from working in D.C. and start getting on the other side of the desk.
Yeah, Ben. So it was interesting. And again, for me, I always wanted to, challenge the boundaries and find those opportunities to be an effective advocate, but continually, challenge myself as well. So aside from, looking at the Veterans Benefits Administration and becoming a subject matter expert around military and veteran benefits, I worked on some private projects developing intuitive benefits navigators, right? We began looking at how to help unravel the mystery, some of the challenges that I dealt with during my transition and working with groups to develop tools to help better transition individuals through the myriad challenges of understanding the Department of Veterans Affairs and the Department of Labor and all of these different agencies and how they, interact with one another to afford us unique opportunities. I got appointed to several different advisory committees. I was able to do some work out with the University of Southern California, doing some fascinating work in the research side, which then became the catalyst for me to get involved with the Department of Defense congressionally directed medical research programs, looking at everything from vision research to environmental exposures. I spent a lot of time with Vietnam veterans looking at Agent Orange, but my generation of veterans had dealt with toxic exposures, both open burn pits and sarin, cyclus sarin, some of the parastigmium bromide, and some of the other prophylactics that we were taking, dealing with the potential threats of chemical and biological warfare agents, mass detonations. And so really beginning to look at that from the scientific side and helping to analyze and study research proposals which lead to benefits and benefits acquisition and all of those components. And again, that all leads around, congressional advocacy. How do we get the proper appropriations to fund all of these programs, but to ensure that the safety nets are there for our military, for our veterans, for their families and caregivers. So learning as much of that as I could, I just continued to explore those opportunities in as many different arenas as I could. Lots of hours put in, oftentimes, for very little or no pay. Those in the veterans community realize that the majority of what we do, we volunteer. We're there to take care of one another as much as possible. So I enjoyed all those times. I became really interested in the service dog industry. I actually applied for a guide dog, and I was doing my due diligence and trying to understand, the different types of guide dogs, how service dogs worked, and in doing all of that exploration, I finally decided, exactly what program I wanted to go with. I was really desiring a German Shepherd, and I chose the Fidelco Guide Dog Foundation. They exclusively breed, train, and place German Shepherds. I spent some time with my VIST coordinator and found out that the Department of Veterans Affairs has a program for blinded veterans that allows us to receive a guide dog, and the Department of Veterans Affairs actually has a health insurance program for our guide dogs, the Trupanion program, which allows for the free veterinary care. And most of the foundations out there in the guide dog sectors, train and place those dogs for free with the blind community. So it's a phenomenal program. All the schools are exceptional. They're all well accredited and certified. And after receiving my guide dog, we had the unique honor and privilege of, we were entered into the American Humane Hero Dog Awards. Believe it or not, it's a national campaign, and we won in the guide dog category. So we ended up going out to Hollywood, California to do the American Humane, the Hero Dog Awards. It was a phenomenal opportunity to represent, both the veteran community and the guide dog community. That also allowed us to be featured on Cesar Millan, Dog Nation, which looked at, really what it was to become a guide dog. Cesar actually filmed the day that I was matched with my guide dog. The moment I took the handle of the harness for the first time and took my first walk, putting down my cane and with the guide dog. And it was really a powerful documentary that we put together for that. And then I was afforded the opportunity to represent that community for some time prior to coming and accepting first the Director of Government Relations position and now the Executive Director's position with the Blinded Veterans Association.
That's great. Before we pull away from the dogs, a question. So if a veteran wanted to find out about a service dog, would he or she talk to the VIS coordinator, or would they go straight to the training facility first? What would be the best direction to go there?
Yeah, so for those of us in the blindness community, the VIS coordinator is always a really good initial point of contact just to help be part of the process of the application process, to have some of the subject matter expertise around the different schools. Some of the schools are campus-based, meaning you go and you spend time as a resident on campus, similar to our blind rehabilitation centers, and they do the training that way. Other programs are home community-based, meaning that they will bring the dog to you and train you in your community at your home. So there's a lot of variables that go into that selection process. Having the paperwork done in advance, the VIS coordinators are phenomenal in helping to assist in the application and selection processes. So I always encourage folks, in our community, we're so blessed to have our VIS coordinators. So having a good, solid relationship with your VIS and ensuring, and listening to your VIS, because guide dogs aren't for everyone. The thing that a lot of folks don't realize when you're matched is that's a 24/7 relationship. You're going to be tethered, and that's actually part of the bonding process, is being tethered to your dog initially. So you establish that bond, and it is 24/7. The dogs become anxious if you're separated because they're there and they have been bred from the moment that, they're weaned. They're being prepared for a life of service, and it's all that they know. And so it's a demanding relationship between a guide and a handler, and the VIS should play an integral role in helping to ensure that that is the right approach to take. And then the schools themselves will also do a comprehensive evaluation to make sure that an individual is a good match, is a good fit for both the breed of dog and for guide dogs in general. The other thing to just touch on really quick for the veteran population is there was some recent legislation under the PAWS Act, which is looking at more of the generalized service dog sector. That's a 5-year study with some pilot programs right now looking at the training and matching of the service dogs for different conditions. So we'll await the outcomes of those studies. And then, you begin to deviate. I don't want to get too lost in the weeds, but, once you get out of the guide dog, the service dog, which are really task-oriented animals, then you get into some of the, therapy and the emotional support. Totally different regulations around what you can and cannot do with those animals, rights of access to public space and things along those lines. So don't want to, again, get too lost in the weeds on all of that. But VIS coordinator, and then think about the breeds of dogs. The one thing about the German Shepherd is, they're also known as a German Shedder with the dual coat. So you're going to wear as much fur as the dog does typically, but they're phenomenal. They're very driven, motivated to serve. So it's really like, no offense to the folks out there with the Labs and the Goldens and the Poodles and the others, phenomenal animals, and I love all of them, but the Shepherds are really driven. I think that they're, the Lamborghini in the guide dog sector.
Oh, great. So just to recap, everybody, just remember, if that's something that you're looking forward to wanting to research, the VIS coordinator would be a great starting point. So going back, before I stopped you there, we were talking about the other organizations.
Yeah, I've spent time, both in the private sector. I've been involved in everything from public-private partnerships, building and or rehabbing, homes for wounded warriors. I helped start a young organization about 10 years ago, Veterans of Modern Warfare, another 501c19, which the Vietnam Veterans of America were helping to mentor, and that was, really looking at that cohort and environmental exposure related situations. And so I've done everything from very small upstarts, community-based programs, up to, again, county, state departments of Veterans Affairs, the federal sectors, and now where I've settled in with the Blinded Veterans Association.
So what's your role with the Blinded Veterans Association today?
So I serve as the executive director. I joined BVA as a member, back when I learned about them in the early 90s. I was involved with the association off and on, and, had the opportunity to do the other things that I was doing. I used to remember going over when BVA was located over in H Street in Washington, D.C., when Tom Miller was the executive director and Tom Zampiri was the director of government relations. And I just remember interacting with those guys, and I was really impressed by BVA. So I was always involved with them, as a member, as colleagues, but had never, really looked at BVA as an employment option. And so I had the opportunity to come on board just before the pandemic as a director of government relations to allow all of my policy background to help the association. We had some incredible accomplishments as I joined the association, everything from, getting website accessibility passed and signed into law to especially adaptive housing for blinded veterans, different grant programs. So we were doing phenomenal work, and then the pandemic began to set in. My predecessor had literally transitioned and walked out of uniform military service into BVA as the executive director and did a phenomenal job for several years helping to transition the association. His wife was retiring, and they needed to catch their breath. So when Joe Bogart announced his retirement, I was asked to step in as the interim executive director and then eventually selected by the board of directors to serve as executive director. And I'm happy to say a couple of years into my tenure now, Joe Bogart is back on staff working with us to help us build some new programs and some new initiatives we're working on. So it's really, I think, a great opportunity to serve our fellow blinded veterans now. And it's probably, Ben, if I could say anything, it's probably been the most natural fit for me. It's been the greatest opportunity in my advocacy. I was always a bit uncomfortable, right? When you deal with blindness, regardless of how comfortable you try to become, we're always a bit differently abled, right? And so in the other arenas, there are always the challenges associated with it. Now, it's such a natural progression for me to go up on Capitol Hill as a blinded veteran representing blinded veterans, because folks know what to expect when we're coming to the office, right? In all of my other roles, I would walk into an office and people wouldn't really know how to deal with me, right? We're kind of those shadows of society. People don't know how to deal with the blind still today, but when they know we're coming, I think it's much more natural, a lot easier for our advocacy efforts.
I agree. I think it's a great organization. That's how you and I met. And, I learned about the BVA from a rehab center in West Palm and, get more and more involved with it. And I think it's a great opportunity. One of the programs that you are restructuring and actually making some great improvements lately is the outreach program. Can you talk about that?
We've got a couple of those, Ben. It's interesting, right? You come into an association such as the Blind and Veterans Association, a very rich 77-year history formed and founded by World War II veterans who really championed everything that we are able to enjoy today, all of the blind rehabilitation centers, the outpatient Visor and Victor clinics for low vision, all the adaptive technology. BVA was the impetus for all of that. So coming in 77 years, a lot of history that's there, but also, you end up in a situation that has the challenges around transformation, right? Transitioning into a modern approach towards service delivery. So we identified those challenges really early on and wanted to find ways to allow our members to really become the lifeline of the association, the real heart and soul of everything that we're trying to do, and how do we connect with one another in our community and champion the initiatives, right? You and I both had those challenges. I was lucky that a VIS coordinator stumbled into me and you chased, as most do. It's the best kept secret. So for us, we want to make sure that we get blinded veterans out there to help identify one another. So we built a new approach towards outreach with our ambassador program. You're one of the lucky graduates of the first cycle that helped us work through that initial program, a 26-week training cycle that's conducted virtually. It's a phenomenal opportunity for individuals to truly learn all the things that, we just spent this time talking about, right? For me, it's been a 30-year, journey. For you've equally been challenged across all of that. What we've tried to do in the ambassador program is really take the history of the Blind and Veterans Association, integrate that into the history of the Department of Veterans Affairs, tie it all together, and in 26 weeks, empower our community with as much information as we possibly can to allow them to be effective advocates, for themselves, but to then really become the extension of the association. We're not expecting anybody to be a subject matter expert initially. We want folks to have enough information to feel very, very comfortable in their advocacy roles as they integrate into the Department of Veterans Affairs. We're looking at getting folks in what used to be the VA Voluntary Services Program, now the Community Development and Civic Engagement Program, but connecting our members with their VIS coordinators. The VIS program and VA Blind Rehabilitation Services has expanded now under a new directive as of last year to now represent and manage the low vision community as well. So their caseloads, if the VA identified some 130,000 legally blind veterans, there's 1.2 million low vision veterans in the Department of Veterans Affairs rosters and caseloads. So we want to make sure that we're there to be as supportive and complementary to the folks that take such good care of us, that being our VIS coordinators. So our ambassadors are going to be equipped, and it doesn't just end, right? There was a 26-week training that you participated in. You got a lot of information. You just went through an exam process to make sure that you acquired the skills. Now you're going to go through an interview board process with our accredited national service team to make sure that folks feel confident and comfortable. But as we go to launch the next phase and the next group of ambassadors, we're expanding, and what we're doing is we're bringing, the first set of ambassadors, this is breaking news, right, in to really be mentors for the next groups, but also we're going to continue to evolve the training. So each subsequent cycle is going to have additional trainings and additional opportunities. So our prior ambassadors come back for those trainings, so they're continually building their skill sets, their advocacy, their knowledge bases to be the most effective ambassadors for our community as possible. So it's an exciting time for us.
It's a great program too. Like you said, I just finished the program and it gave me the opportunity to learn so much stuff. I mean, I learned about what your spouse is allowed to do. I learned about grants, about claims, so much. And then I had to take the test, of course, but
But imagine if we had this training, right? And granted, I mean, we probably wouldn't have absorbed much transitioning, out of service. But, at that interface of when we really hit that engagement point with VA, if training like this was available, it would have truly made our journeys so much more seamless, a bit easier for all of us. So, again, we're excited. We're excited to build. We've learned a lot from each of you. That's the phenomenal piece about being that, pathfinder and helping to launch a new program is we were able to spend a lot of time interacting with all of you. We've been analyzing all of that behind the scenes. We've been having our regular staff huddles and looking at, what did we do right? What did we do wrong? Where can we improve? And so we just took so much out of this. And it's a testament to everybody that was involved in this process. Ben, we thought, when we first looked at this, our goal was we're going to find 5 people to go through this training with us, right? And eventually, in a year or so, we might have enough people to staff the 13 blind rehabilitation centers and expand from there. You guys, week in and week out, had 40-plus individuals participating in that training, some of which opted not to test yet because they want to do it again. They feel like they can absorb more, and they want to take these different approaches. And so it's really motivating us on a staff level, on an organization level, and it's affording us not just what we're going to be able to do to support our fellow veterans in the Department of Veterans Affairs, but, it helps us with our corporate relationships, with our corporate sponsors, with our vendors. The next group, we've got corporate sponsors in the accessibility arena that are lining up to sponsor the trainings to be able to come in and really help the ambassadors now expand their skill sets into the technology sector and understanding adaptive technologies, which has now become the catalyst for our newest program, which we will be launching just after convention in August. We're looking at an October launch for our new vet tech initiatives, which are going to be extensions of blind rehabilitation trainings on all things adaptive technology. So we're excited. That, again, is building upon what we've just done with the ambassador trainings. The other thing that I'd just like to mention is we also went through a radical transformation of what used to be our Operation Peer Support Program, now known as Team BVA. That's our activities-based program. That's what my predecessor, now my colleague Joe Bogart, is back helping us to now really deploy fully. That's our opportunities for all of our members, their families, caregivers, to get out and experience amazing adaptive sports, everything from downhill skiing to kayaking to hunting and fishing, sailing, therapeutic horseback riding, you name it. Team BVA offers the opportunities, and our entire membership will be able to register for events and activities, and we fund all of that for our individuals. And it really helps to get folks reconnected, reintegrated back into their communities. Again, begin challenging those boundaries, right? Getting out on the trails. I mean, we've literally got lights out blind individuals that are training right now to summit Mount Everest. It's just amazing things going on in the association. So
I think the associations, they're growing since I've been there. Wisdom for the Blind, which sponsors this podcast here, is a drive because we wanted to get the knowledge out there, and we learned so much from the ambassador program. That's my direction, is I want to get the word out, and this is why we are doing these podcasts. And you guys are doing a great job getting that together. And we talked a little bit about it, but you got your 77th convention coming up in August.
We do. We're excited about that. It was, we were scheduled for the 75th in Washington, D.C. when the pandemic hit, and we unfortunately had to go virtual for the last 2 years. So we already had those contracts inked, and so we're back in Washington, D.C. in our nation's capital this year, so it'll be an exciting time for us. I can say that we have already seen more registrations, both on the exhibitor vendor side as well as on the member side, than in the prior 5 years of convention. So there's a lot of energy beginning to swell back in the association again. I think it's some of the new approaches towards service delivery, the way that we're modernizing and building out everything from our claims program. Another thing to take a lot of pride in, when many of our sister organizations shuttered during the pandemic, we invested in technology and went totally paperless, allowing our claims teams to, process every aspect of a veteran's claim paperless, right? We do, digital signatures on your smartphone, and everything's, digitally uploaded into the VA systems. And so everything from building that veteran service program with some of the best accredited representatives that we could go out and acquire that came out of our sister organizations, through these processes. So that's really what it's all about, is building a team. We're hiring more and more blinded veterans to lead the association. I touched on the upcoming Vet Tech program. Folks are going to be excited when they learn who's going to be leading that initiative, but we have another one of our blinded veterans who's coming out of the Department of Veterans Affairs to lead that program for us, and we're continuing to hire from within. We're going to continue to build the veteran service program. We've got to expand that. And again, what the pandemic allowed us to do is go virtual. So we have folks working for us as far away as Germany, but we're spreading across the country as well. So we've deployed a remote workforce, virtual. We're using state-of-the-art technology that integrates into VA. So everything from Microsoft Azure cloud-based systems to SharePoint and Microsoft Teams. And that allows us to have that, virtual collaborative work environment. So we're constantly connected, and it's no different than being in a brick and mortar office with one another, except we're able to now hire more blinded veterans and not expect them to relocate to a very high rent district such as Washington, D.C.
Yeah, I think the organization's come a long way. And if you want to know more about the organization, you can go to www.bva.org, or you can go to w4bv.org, and there's a link also. But great organization. You guys have come a long way.
Just take the www off the front, Ben. You're a tech guy. You should know that by now. We've moved away from the World Wide Web, so hit any one of your browsers, whether you're on Chrome, Firefox, whatever it is, just BVA, Bravo Victor Alpha.org. So just BVA.org in the browser. That'll get you there. www. Your stuff will sit there and spin, and you'll go, well, those guys don't even exist.
Well taken. Well taken. I think that we've covered everything. Did we miss anything that you'd like to talk about?
I don't think anything. I think, we appreciate that. We encourage folks to monitor the website. That's been a work in progress for us as we're restructuring and rebuilding. So you'll see additional content going up there really daily at this point as we build it out. I want to commend you, Ben, again, not just for the accomplishments of the ambassador program, but for what you're building here for the community, any role that we play in helping to support you all in these initiatives. Again, knowledge is power, right? And the more we're able to empower our community and effectively help champion advocacy for our entire community, the better the world is as a result of that. So kudos to you and your team.
Thank you very much.
We know the challenges, obviously, of building something such as this, but you're doing a phenomenal job, and we're looking forward to promoting and supporting you all however we can as an association.
Well, we appreciate it, and we enjoy working together with you guys. And even though you made me take a test, I appreciate it, though.
Yeah, well, it's good for you, right? It's humbling, right?
It was very humbling.
And now you got to go through an interview. That's the other thing. Folks get really comfortable when you go through that retirement and blind rehabilitation. You get really, really comfortable. And now you guys went through the test, and I don't even know if it's been publicly announced yet. But now you got to go before a panel.
Oh yeah,
you got to go before a review board and interview. So that's going to be great. But again, that's a unique opportunity for us again to really learn from all of you, right? To help us improve upon what we're building, how to expand upon that. And we can only learn that if we're open-minded and understand what worked for all of you that experience this. How do we improve upon that? And how do we keep you all engaged to help us build these future iterations of what we're trying to do for our community.
And that's what the whole team needs to do. All you brothers and sisters out there need to share the wisdom. That's what we're doing. And Don, I appreciate your service, your dedication that you put throughout the years, your support from your family, and thank you for joining us. I'm going to turn it over to our studio with Ellie, and she's going to brief us on what's happening on some of the other segments of Wisdom for the Blind. Thank you very much, Don. I appreciate it, and thank you for coming and joining us.
Thanks so much, Ben.
Thanks, Ben. Well, let's take a look in the W4TB inbox and see what viewers have to say. Share Episode 1, Reveal of Wisdom for Blinded Veterans. David in Florida writes, just wanted to congratulate both Doug Cram and Ben Keeley regarding the fantastic podcast interview they have created and aired, overviewing the current status and future plans for wisdom for blinded veterans. Their podcast is so very, very professional and well done. It covers every aspect as to what is so desperately needed by the blind and the vision-impaired veterans community. Their efforts and progress to date has been truly exceptional and certain to be incredibly beneficial and appreciated by so many as the foundation for our beautiful future. Thank you. Sincerely, David. Thanks, David, for your nice comments. To our listeners, please remember that if you have any kind of feedback, you can always email them to feedback@w4tb.org. Should you need any more information on the Blinded Veterans Association, BVA, you can email us at info@w4bv.org. You can also go to bva.org on the web. Also, to get more information on the VA's blind rehabilitation centers, please visit va.gov or w4bv.org. Please take the time to check out our new show Wisdom Tech Talk on your favorite source for podcast. This is Ellie with Wisdom for the Blind Studios. Back to you, Ben.
I'd like to take this opportunity one more time to thank Don for taking the time out of his busy schedule to be with us today and thank him for all the things that he's done to help our fellow veterans. I hope tonight it helped someone out there navigate the seas, find some calm waters, and I'd like everybody to remember we live on a small planet and we need to surround ourselves with love and respect. Don't be afraid to say good morning or good afternoon to somebody. Don't be afraid to open the door or just smile. It's a small world, a small country. We all need to get together. Until next time, thank you for joining us. This is Ben Keeley, and thanks again for joining Vision of a Veteran. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Vision of a Veteran. Keep a lookout for the next episode coming soon. We hope you enjoyed our guests and got some ideas on how to navigate the seas to reach calmer waters. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, make sure to like, rate, and review. And if you could, please donate to help support W4TB. You can do so at w4tb.org. It'll ensure that we can help more veterans as we move along. Thanks so much for listening. See you next time from the Wisdom for the Blind Studios in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Produced by Wisdom for the Blind and VNS Productions, a division of VNS International.